On March 30th, 2021, episode 170 of Black Clover aired. Old fans and new stood and watched as our beloved series went on hiatus, with no date set for its return. With the decline of Yuki Tabata's health and the lack of a structured schedule, the anime was stuck with the decision of so many other series that came before: continue on an anime-specific storyline, or go on hiatus and allow the manga to continue for more to be adapted later. From 2021 to 2025, the manga slowly extended into the climax of the story, leaving room for the adaptation to continue once again. But today, July 2nd, 2025, deep from within the pits of the harshest Grand Magic Zone, the Black Clover anime is set to return. And with it, I, WK, have returned to speak on one of the most underrated series in all of shonen. And the cheer was heard all around the world, on X or Twitter, or whatever the hell you want to call it today. If you don't know me, I'm WK, and I'm mostly known on here for concocting crazy, kooky-ass theories about Black Clover based on science, or philosophy, or psychology, or basically anything that Tabata seems to pull inspiration from, whether that's things like Paracelsus, or Carl Jung, or Gnosticism, or the Kabbalah, or whatever mythology. Now, if you do know me, hey, it's been a while. I know. Like the Black Clover anime, I took my own hiatus, my own training arc, if you will. Married with 2 kids takes more time than you would think. Also, in case you don't know, I actually created my own story. Well, I'm in the process of doing so. My first book, which is a novel, Echoes of Destruction, just came out July 1st, like a day ago. That's right, the day before all of this. It's kind of wild. Anyway, I did come here to talk about something specific, and that, if you read the title, should be fairly clear. I come today to talk about antimatter. And I know those of you who have followed me from the beginning know that this theory is kind of what solidified me in the space early on, but I've never really sat down and really broke it down with a script, organization, a little editing, and all that. So today will be my attempt, and for those who want to avoid manga spoilers, I will let you know when we get to that point. To begin, I'd like to ask you to put your own mind in the headspace of being a fantasy author and walk this path with me. If you had a particular love for science, like Tabata clearly does, with evidence being his previous series, Hungry Joker, with mentions of Newton and Mendel and more, how likely do you think it is that anti-magic is Tabata's own version of antimatter? Let's talk about it, then you can let me know what you think at the end in the comments. Really quick, for those who don't know what antimatter is, antimatter is essentially the anti-counterpart to regular matter. Protons have antiprotons, electrons have positrons. When these collide, they annihilate, converting their mass to energy, like a lot of energy. Essentially 1/2 gram of matter in antimatter would annihilate and make the same amount of energy that was in the bomb in Nagasaki in 1945. Ridiculous, I know. Nowadays, we can use this kind of technology for PET scans, which actually stands for positron emission tomography. Fun fact, it helps with imaging to find pathologies like cancer and whatnot. Anyway, a lot of science, cool stuff. You can look it up separately. We're going to talk about Black Clover today, so back to it. The concept of anti-magic was introduced in the series as essentially the antithesis of magic. Not only could it cancel out magic, but it honed in on powerful magic sources, like when he fought Ladros. The former can be attributed directly to its real-life counterpart, antimatter, while the latter, not so much. But that's okay. This is a fantasy story. I want to say that now. That's the beauty of all of this. You can be inspired and take little bits of truth and bury them in magical processes. Look at someone like Brandon Sanderson, who, if you don't know, is essentially the most prolific fantasy author out right now. Seriously, like super incredibly popular. He weaves real tangible science into his hard magic containing stories. I mean, we clearly have quantum physics within his stories. He has quantum tunneling, entanglement, antimatter. He himself has confirmed these inspirations, but I'll have you take note, he does actually call himself, quote unquote, an armchair scientist. That is something I think readers need to take note on. Not every author is going to be an expert in everything that inspires them. I mean, they're almost never experts in those fields, right? They're writers, they're authors. Even I myself, I'm essentially a chemist, dressing as an author in a lot of these cases, but a lot of people say write what you know, right? And so I myself am a chemist by training, maybe a biochemist, but I can tell you I've been inspired by very similar concepts that Sanderson uses and Tabata uses and have used in all their stories. Doesn't mean you take some of the cool or popular aspects of that science or philosophy and use them with a tweak here and there. Sure, why not? How many times do we see retellings of mythology or folklore or fairy tales or even real history? Hell, we have seen that specifically with Tabata in this series already many times. So some are very obvious, like Julius Novachrono and Julius Caesar, or Charmy and Little Red Riding Hood, or the Agrippa family just in general. Noct being a direct reference to Johann Faust and his deal with Mephistopheles, or his devils being specifically a dog, a donkey, a cat, and a rooster, respectively, in reference to the Bremen town musicians. Or one of my personal favorites, actually, and Sylph being a direct reference to Peter Pan and Tinkerbell. I think we all have seen that time and time again with the series. Some of you have to, some of them you have to kind of squint a little harder, like Noelle being the ugly duckling, but I digress. Tabata clearly loves to do this, so why not? In chapter 19, or episode 18 in the anime, we see the first potential counterpoint to anti-magic not being an in-world equivalent to antimatter. That is, when Asta somehow stores and uses Noelle's water magic with the Demon Dweller Blade that he essentially just got at that point. When watching this, I believe this to be the first time we see Asta really use the blades as intended prior to their quote-unquote corruption via anti-magic, with their own internal ability, we'll say. And through most of the series, Asta does use his swords essentially as big sword equals great sword and small sword equals more control, better precision, and faster. But as the series progresses, we're introduced to the Blades of Licht having their own intended functions. And while anti-magic corrupts these blades, these sword abilities still remain, which, side note, is freaking awesome. But anyway, this leads you to the conclusion that anti-magic can still be antimatter in this case. It doesn't break the theory. The Demon Dweller simply has what is essentially a container that can store magic or anti-magic separately, as we see it later when Asta can throw out slashes of anti-magic from the Demon Dweller. Now, there's another instance of Demon Dweller that I'll touch on last, simply for not giving huge manga spoilers for the anime-only folks. So next, I guess there are a decent amount of people that are like, well, if anti-magic is really antimatter, then when magic and anti-magic annihilate, like their real-life counterparts, matter and antimatter, wouldn't there be a massive explosion that would destroy everyone in the whole entire verse? And to that I say, really? Yeah, I mean, fire magic would roast people alive, most likely. Water magic has the potential to shoot off skin like a friggin' power washer. And spatial magic would probably create a black hole on Earth. And if it didn't, gravity magic would definitely have some more ramifications than what is shown in the series, as would Yami's magic. I mean, like, come on, man. Like, this is a fantasy story. There are a few examples I could give. There are a few more examples I could give, rather, but not trying to have crazy huge manga spoilers yet. Cool stuff later. That's all I'll say. Stop being a contrarian to be a contrarian. Even Sanderson, who does a lot of really scientific and defined principles within his story, takes some liberties with all of this, as do I in my own stories. So do see an explosion of sorts that I think looks a lot like particle annihilation really soon, where the anime picks back up. But I'll show this picture instead of getting into the nitty gritty of the moment, and I'm not going to spoil that moment for anyone. So just this moment here, I think, could be argued towards annihilation is occurring, some magical form of it. Okay, so I think we're at the point of spoiler territory, though. So for those of you that do tune out here, again, I wrote my own fantasy novel with many more to come. It's called Echoes of Destruction. It uses a lot of these same inspirations: Gnosticism, alchemy, cool magic, found family, etc., etc. And it's not the absolute doorstopper of a book like some with like 700 pages. It's more digestible than that. I wrote this for the anime and manga fan that wants to get into fantasy. If you do like Black Clover or any other adjacent series, just give it a shot. It's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple, Kobo. There is a ebook and physical. Links are in description. Anyway, back to Black Clover. Alright, so that earlier mention of the other instance with the Demon Dweller Blade. I'm sure most of you know what scenario I'm referencing. It's got to be the infamous Comrade Demon thing, right? Like Comrade Demon whenever Asta was sharing the anti-magic. But this is easily batted back with the Dweller's own ability that we know of to essentially take in or put out magic to and from others, as seen by Licht during the Elf arc. I think this more just has to do with Asta's ability to control anti-magic and the Dweller here more than anything, and Ryu actually directly states that right when Asta does all of this. So, like it or not, I really still don't think that this will break the idea that anti-magic is the in-world equivalent of antimatter. Lastly, and this one might be controversial, not because what I'm about to say is controversial, but because this moment in the series actually ended up being somewhat controversial. Some love it, some hate it. I'm sure you can probably guess what it is. When Yuno grabs the Dweller and you see him in this iconic scene where he looks almost half corrupted, those against the theory will say, how? So we'll kind of break it down. Well, firstly, if you're mad at the decision, creatively stop. This is this is just badass as hell. You're allowed to not like things, but this is just freaking awesome. Seriously though, I don't think him being in this weird half state completely debunks the theory, trying, to get more serious here. There is something actually really called protonium, and those of you that have been around, actually had a previous theory that it was like kind of an adjacent thing to this antimatter, and why this whole antimatter turned into what it did. So protonium, which is an exotic atom composed of both a proton and an antiproton, and yes, those should collide and annihilate, but they don't. In this specific case, and it's a very small time frame, right? A lot of these particle physics things, they all happen on the smallest of time scales. But in this case, they don't annihilate. I say that to say there are weird instances where you have matter and antimatter together for a very short amount of time without annihilation. So technically, theory still doesn't break. I especially like this example because it shows Yuno, who has an insane amount of mana, star magic, wind magic, and the wind spirit. He stops using Neverland to shield everyone in this moment, and he still has mana left over to hold back the corruption. And he's like this half to where it's like they're like the Comra demons they're kind of like cloaked in anti-magic. He's like straight up has the ability maybe to bring in something like a solar wind type spell that also has like some antimatter type properties in it. Like, I think I'm really, really, really excited to see exactly what Tabata does with this. And this actually is going to be dropping on the same day that he releases new chapters. So I'm super, super hyped. Side note, so there's one more thing that I included before that I'm not here, but I'll mention it. So there is another reason that I had previously mentioned of antimatter being anti-magic, and it was this image right here. Obviously, the panel when Asta did Devil Union looks eerily similar to this. I didn't list it here simply because this image's origin actually comes from the SCP Foundation, which isn't really a credible source. Now, don't get me wrong, Tabata isn't infallible. Maybe he just Googled antimatter symbols and really liked the star, but I kind of doubt it. But the SCP Foundation and their wiki isn't exactly a scientific institution or organization. It is, by their own words, the following. The SCP Wiki is a collaborative, speculative fiction website about the SCP Foundation, a secretive organization that contains anomalous or supernatural items and entities away from the eyes of the public, or so it may appear. This wiki The wiki is a collaborative effort made possible by the contributions of hundreds of authors. So yeah, I'm not including it here in this case. It's, rather shaky. I think it's cool, but, that's not going to go on my fridge as a, concrete reason why. Like I said, I do think it's cool. But anyway, that's all I can do with the time allotted for now. I think I touched on most of the things that I really wanted to. I sincerely hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope those of you that do give my own series, The First Matter Saga, a shot, that you enjoy the hell out of it. This is what I've always loved about Black Clover and its community. I've always loved getting together around the campfire, kind of sharing theories, thoughts, partially intoxicated ramblings. If you're still not convinced about antimatter, that's fine. Go ahead and leave, just tell me in the comments. Don't forget to like and sub if you enjoy content like this. I'll probably talk about several manga or comic series in general, maybe even some novels in a similar fashion going forward, but hopefully I'm here for the marathon instead of the sprint, kind of like I did last time. Videos will be spaced out a little bit more. But anyway, hope everyone has a great day. WK out.